It's true. We need himbo representation. This is a pro himbo channel, okay? Himbos rise up. Let us call you the kings you are, right? All right, call me whenever you're ready, friend. Also, don't mind me. I'm going to be taking some of my pills that I forgot to take earlier. Hello.
Dude?
How's it going?
Oh, just chilling. The usual.
The huge. So what are your himbo takes? What is this himbo
It's
representation?
it's real interesting being a classic man these days.
Mm-hmm.
Because on the one hand, you want to do right by yourself and go off and do whatever you please, as is traditional with most people's sense of individualism. And then you've got society breathing down your neck going, "You're not being very manly now, are you?" And
You
it's
have
an
a
interesting kind of dynamic.
you have an extremely good voice. You should do like ASMR. I'm not into ASMR, but I assume that your voice would be extremely good at it.
If I had $1 for every time somebody told me that, I'd never have to work again in my life.
So, what do you find constraining about society as a himbo?
Oh, shit. I mean, I mostly say that because I'm terrible to myself, but if I really had to um, describe it, um, I think probably the most difficult thing is you don't really have, like I said, it's hard to find the freedom to do as you wish if it isn't something that's considered traditional guy behavior. Like, I'm not gonna lie, there's stuff I do and all that that's like, my women folk friends are, they don't bat an eye, but I have to more or less prepare for a court appearance every time I'm with with the gang. So
I got
it's a
you.
very weird kind of flip flop that happens when it comes to the company I keep.
Yeah, the bros aren't as open to deviant behavior, and I don't say deviant as in bad, but like different behavior
Yeah,
maybe.
they don't appreciate, it's one of those things where they don't appreciate behavior outside of what they consider the norm. And I don't think it's on any sort of conscious malicious level. I think it's probably more of a reflexive and instinctive level that's been baked into them by growing up in the world in which we live. Because I know that I personally contend with thoughts like that myself, but fortunately I'm self-aware enough that I am able to rationalize them into the dirt instead of letting them be a thing that other people have to suffer through dealing with.
Can I
I'm an
ask?
asshole, but I'm not that flavor of asshole. Ask away.
Can I ask like why? So like if you can't be yourself around your like guy friends, why do you continue to be friends with them?
Um,
And I know that
that's
that's
a
like a
good
complicated
question.
question.
I know it's a very low. It's a very. It's one of the. Wow. Yeah. It's it's the kind of question that one often stays up and kind of lays in bed in the middle of the night wondering, why am I friends with these people?
Hmm.
Why am I friends with anybody who's like this? But at the same time, I think it comes down to a matter of it's such a common way of thinking when it comes to being your average guy that you kind of learn to just uh, grin and bear it. You kind of have to exist under punches at all times. And I think after a while, it becomes a matter of deciding what's an acceptable loss margin to work under.
Is it is
And
is it also partly like difficult to find people who don't have that kind of way of thinking.
Oh, for sure. Unless you're in unless you're in like the kind of area where everybody wears flannels, beanies, and only listens to music nobody's ever heard of, you're gonna be hard pressed to find anybody that won't
I feel like I just got
immediately
called out.
kind of. Yeah, I'm pretty good at doing that when I even when I'm not trying to. Yeah, no, it's the kind of thing that definitely isn't easy to find outside of, heavily populated areas because I live in the middle of nowhere, USA. So my closest neighbors are farmland and some deer. So
I
yeah,
gotcha.
for the most part, it's one of the like when it comes to rural living, you get as about as stereotypically macho man as it gets. Oh, it's an
Yeah,
interesting kind of thing to have to contend with.
yeah, it's something that I've found very interesting as well. Like as a trans woman who's really open about being trans, like there's a lot of people in rural areas who have reached out to me. I have a relatively like significant following in the trans community on Instagram,
Yeah,
and like I get constant messages from like trans women who like haven't started their transition yet, who are like in their 30s or 40s, some even in their 50s, who are terrified of transitioning because they know that it means like transgressing these social norms, and they don't know who in their community is going to support them or who is going to like completely cut them out. And like, when you're risking your entire like social world, like that becomes a really big jump to make.
yeah. I mean, shit. The first time I wore my fucking bitch killer boots out in public, I fucking it felt like I was walking with a soda cooler on my head filled with grenades. I mean, I enjoyed wearing them and all, but at the same time, I was pretty much always sort of psychologically tensed in case Chud McGee and his ilk decided they wanted to talk shit or something, which doesn't really happen where I live. But again, paranoia is an interesting feeling.
Right, because like you're like breaking like this it's completely bullshit cultural norm, but it like you're aware of it on some level, right? So like it's really hard to get out of this headspace of like that it could be dangerous depending on who you meet, where you are, all
Yeah.
that stuff. um
I'm, I mean, on the one hand, I have the benefit of being physically imposing enough that it's not likely anybody would be willing to fuck with me, but at the same time, if I were not as spooky as I am, I guarantee that I probably wouldn't have quite as easy of a time. And I mean, yeah, it is definitely an interesting thing to have to contend with your own innate biases because I'm not going to lie, it is so tiresome having to constantly remember to rationalize the weird societal ghosts in my own personal machine to quietness because like on the one hand I want to, be excellent to everybody I encounter, but at the same time you have all of these sort of firmware expectations, beliefs, and habits baked into your almost subconscious
mhm.
that kind of drive you to treat people how society at large might treat them. And it's not a good feeling, I'll tell you that much.
I'm sure. Like a lot of this conditioning starts before we're even born, right? Like now we're having gender reveal parties like before babies are born. We're willing to burn down like entire forests to reveal the genders of our children. And like
Oh, yeah.
like like the expectations, the like even the color schemes that we are attached to get determined by like you know, what our genitals are at birth, and like transgressing any of that becomes like a really radical act. And so it's I I'm always wondering like how can we better reach um like people like yourself, honestly. How do you think like society in general can do better by like men who want to like transgress social norms like in small towns or in rural areas,
Yeah,
because that's a pretty uphill battle in my opinion, right?
yeah, it's I would say that it's certainly the kind of issue that is a lot more pervasive than most people may initially realize, simply because while it is pretty widespread, contrary to what others may believe, at the same time, because it's more common in rural areas, it doesn't get around outside of the immediate community itself because it's so rurally located. I mean, a lot of societal shifts that happen are usually driven by population centers. So when you have issues that are mostly confined to little podunk towns in the middle of nowhere America, it turns into an interesting affair of having to fight for every inch of fuck you, I'm an adult, I can do as I please that you get.
Yeah, do you find it's like, because I've found that in like rural America there's like this really interesting like dichotomy, right? Because on the one hand, they're like most people in rural areas want to basically be like, fuck you, freedom, America, like, I can do whatever the fuck I want. Um, but at the same time, there is this really restrictive nature to that freedom where like if you're going outside of what a lot of these communities find acceptable, they feel like they have the right to like run you out of town or um, treat you differently. So I guess I'm looking for like how do we get into that? You know?
Yeah, I think that's another tricky thing to figure out is it's so easy to in rural communities, even if you're not trying to transgress any social norms, it's even if you, for example, I don't know, support the wrong sports ball team, you can still be dropped like a hot rock because,
Exactly.
you know, all 200 of the other residents or all 1,000 of them will immediately know because everybody knows everybody in tiny towns.
hmm
And as a result, you kind of become the phantom pariah that everybody knows of, but nobody acknowledges. And I think when it comes to breaking through that, it's honestly kind of something that I've never really considered in depth simply because it's always seemed to be such an insurmountable obstacle in when it comes to shifting a dynamic that's so decentralized, spread out, and isolated in relation to what itself. It kind of is something that I think is really, really hard to plan out a method of dealing with it.
Yeah. Um, what about like do your other guy friends, do they how do they toe the line, right? Or have you noticed that? Can you talk about that at all?
Honestly, I'm gonna tell you right now, I have no clue what the hell they do because if they're anything even a little like me, they're nowhere near as willing to show it. Because I can tell you right now, they're probably under the grip of the world around them much more tightly than I am. And even if they are more like me than I may believe they are, I'm certain that they are nowhere close to being as willing to express that. Because, as we know, being different is unfortunately more often than not really dangerous.
Right. Yeah. So there's like this it's kind of a multi-tiered barrier, right? Because on the one hand, they're policing themselves, and on the other hand, they're also all policing each other, right? Like,
Mm,
there is the element of, you know, I don't want to show my weakness or femininity, unacceptable ways of being masculine or whatever. Um,
mm.
and on the other hand, there's the incentive there. Well, I don't want to seem like the odd one out, so I'm going to punish anyone who steps out of line. Um, at least that has been my experience in some of these circles. I'm not sure if that's
Oh
your
yeah.
experience.
Yeah, that's definitely. I've known people who have, and I have been one of those people who have been in situations where, you don't want to go with what everybody else is doing because you objectively understand that it may not be cool, but at the same time, you don't want to end up in the crosshairs of the masses as well. So do your best to keep your head down and out of sight simply by going with whatever wave is currently rolling at the time. And I think for me, one of the quickest and earliest examples of this that hit me in my life was when I entered high school, because up until I was high school aged, I had been homeschooled all my life. So I was generally I lived a pretty solitary-ish childhood, and I was typically the kind of kid who was comfortable with doing whatever the fuck I wanted.
Hmm.
So, for the most part, I was pretty secure with who I was. Then high school happened, and then, like, within the first year or two, I noticed that I was a vastly different and much meaner person. I was like, shit, what the hell? I'm a, I am the villain now. And I mean, I wasn't, outright awful to anybody, but at the same time, I was noticeably less, I guess you could say, I was noticeably less benevolent than I might have been before. Because, when you're like 10, 11, 12, it's pretty much a no brainer to be nice to other people. But
Hmm.
then once you reach high school, there's this sort of click that happens once you spend enough time around people your age that sort of becomes this buzzing sensation in the back of your mind, reminding you that showing kindness of any sort is a liability, and that toughening up is the only way you can really truly survive among your peers.
Right.
And that
Oh,
fucks with you.
yeah, it's an incredibly like formative time where people are trying to figure out how to survive socially, you know?
Yeah.
Um, so was that kind of like your wake up moment? Like, or are you like, because I was going to ask you, like, what, what reached you to kind of like get you out of this traditionalist kind of way of thinking, right?
I think the thing that kind of gave me the gumption to shift away from what everyone else was doing was, I mean, it wasn't really so much of a sudden drop of the hat aha moment as it was a similarly pervasive simmering in the back of my conscience that was always there and always attempting to remind me that you never go full uh, you never go full big bad evil guy. Uh, it Throughout the high school experience, it was there, and then once I was out and on to
Throughout the
college life, you immediately feel this proverbial weight come off your shoulders, because one of the first things you realize once you hit college is that nobody cares. You can do what you want and nobody will care.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's probably one of the best things I've ever actually learned from college is the fact that in the real world, nobody cares. You can do what you want. And as long as you're not hurting anybody, good on you. Go off. Do what
Mm-hmm.
you like. And I think that's when the that pervasive sense of trying to hold on to what was left of my childhood identity kind of resurfaced and began to reform, uh, sort of like a heavily damaged coral reef growing back over time. It was immediately, sort of as soon as it was out of an environment in which it had to be stifled so much, that once again immediately kind of sprung back into living. And I think that was probably one of the things that kind of saved me, in a sense, from having to experience an additional layer of misery on top of the one that life typically provides you,
Mm-hmm.
in that you simply don't get to do as you want and be who you want to be because you're so used to society shutting you down. And then you get to a point when you realize that society will only shut you down as much as you let it shut you down. And once you get to that point, it's kind of all uphill from there. And that's how it's been for me.
Yeah, I mean, like it's the kind of thing where like, and this is what I really mean when I want to like talk about men's issues or issues that are facing men. It's that there's a lot of misery that men inflict upon themselves. These
Oh, yeah.
these these are what make this is why people talk about toxic masculinity. It's not that masculinity itself is toxic. It's that the repression and the denial of self that a lot of people do, that a lot of men do to themselves, hurts them. And it hurts them in profound and deep ways because they're denying themselves the freedom to be who they really want to be. And
Oh, yeah.
I think that that's really sad. We lose out on a lot by making people conform like this. You know, everyone says that communism makes people conform, but it's one of the things that most makes people conform in our current society is these rigid gender roles that people enforce on each other.
Yeah, exactly. And that's where it gets kind of difficult to traverse because, there's, I mean, it's hard, especially when you get to a point where you realize that you're kind of addicted, in a sense, to behaving in the way that um, the masses might expect you to behave. Like, there are still some traditionally annoyingly kind of guyish things that pop into my head here and there that I really hate having to deal with just on a matter of general principle because it's annoying and I don't like dealing with it. But at the same time, it happens to me anyways because, like an addiction, it's just kind of there.
Yeah,
Like,
can you expound on that just a little bit? Like what can you give an example?
like, I guess you could say for me personally, it's like the idea of being for me personally, like there's a part of me that's addicted to the notion of being like the bad omen of the group, the black sheep,
Mm-hmm.
which is totally nonsensical bullshit. Like, on the one hand, I just want to be a cool dude, 1 2 3. I just want to be Bill Dipperly, but like I can't do it because I'm always having to contend with the me that's like, no, you must be edgy and an asshole and all this stuff because otherwise nobody will think you're cool and they'll think you're a fucking dweeb. Don't do it. And it's absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah, like Yeah,
And I,
there's this like place that we go to, right, where like in some ways we've moved beyond these ideas, but in other ways, like, you know, they're still ingrained into us by society, right? Like this is why a lot of people are like, you know, you're like kind of everyone has racial bias, right? Everyone has gendered bias. Everyone has
oh
these
yeah,
things in them. It's just a matter of trying to overcome them, right? It's the
yeah,
trying that makes us better.
yeah. It takes a lot of conscious thought and practice to overcome the innate functions of your mind. And I think that there are a lot of people who are either simply put off by having to expend that kind of effort or are afraid to have to go to the parts of their minds that these particular sorts of processes operate in. And I think it's that whole idea of having to confront the less glamorous ends of yourself that tends to throw a monkey wrench in these kinds of societal betterment situations.
Hmm. So, since you're kind of like embedded in this sort of situation, do you have any ideas of how like or like advice you can give other people of how to, I don't know, maybe shake some of their friends out of these strict ways of thinking?
Honestly, I'm not even gonna lie. It's to kind of help people get out of that weird headspace of must be as stereotypical as I possibly can. Like honestly, it's the littlest shit that does it because I mean, for me personally, you know, some of the some of the most basic stuff has been like when I've worn something atypical and getting a nice from one of the gang and I'm like, hell yeah, dude. Like it's simple things like idle compliments or, you know, non-negative acknowledgement of whatever it is your friend is doing or saying or otherwise that is outside of what society may expect from them. Like as far as I'm concerned, it doesn't have to be any kind of super complicated multi-step process toward opening people up. That'll happen on their own once they get to a level where they realize who they are inside is okay to let out, that it's fine to be you.
Hmm.
And like I said, it doesn't take a multi step uh, Ponzi scheme style process to get people to a level where they realize how they want to be is totally attainable.
Right.
It's the little stuff that helps.
Yeah, I think that's some actually like some super good insight, right? Like um I find that it is not super helpful to like sit down and be like, "Hey, this is what toxic masculinity is, my BFFs. Hello. I'm going to explain toxic masculinity to you right now." Like I don't find that like that sort of like having the talk or a talk with them, right, is generally very helpful. I think that your approach is actually way better, and that's by building people up in positive ways. You know, like
Oh yeah.
and ways that kind of go outside of the way like guys especially usually compliment one another, right? Like
Mm,
usually guys aren't complimenting each other's outfits. Usually guys aren't complimenting like emotional intelligence or like things like this, like how they're reacting to different things. And I think building people up in these small ways, in like small instances, right? You know, like, hey,
yeah.
I like your shoes. You know, nice shoes, or
Yeah.
like things like that. That can do a lot for men. That can, I think, change a lot of their behavior over a long term. Like when we're talking about close knit friend groups who, you know, you're not going to ditch them, but like
Yeah.
maybe you want to, maybe you wish that they were acting a little bit less I don't know, rigid in their ideas of how it's okay to behave. I think
Yeah.
transgressing in positive ways is something that you can use to build people up.
Oh yeah, for certain. I mean, what was mentioned earlier is absolutely true. Like, anytime I'm put into a situation where I'm getting the talk, as you put it, I roll my eyes and go, "Oh boy, here comes the spiel again for the dozenth time this year, and I'm not trying to hear it because I already know." So, I mean, it's not fun being put into a situation where you don't feel like you're being treated as an equal person. You're more being talked down to and patronized as if you're a small child who can't comprehend more than things like one plus one is two. And I think that's probably what puts a lot of people off of the large scale social betterment that a lot of people strive to spread out, is that people don't like being addressed as if they're children, as if they, don't understand something. I I think discourse to better people is easier to achieve when you address them as if, as if they've already got this understood on some level, because in a lot of cases I think people do have this kind of concept understood. It's just so far tucked away in the back of their minds that they may not know that they understand. And
Hmm.
I think that putting them in a situation where they can let that come out on their own is much more constructive than simply telling them, "Hey, you back there, you should open up some more. Do
Right.
all these things. Say all these things. Be free, baby." Like, come on now. That's it's for me at least nowhere near what I would call as constructive as just letting people run their own show.
Exactly. Do you have any final memes or anything you want to shout out before you hop off?
Let me. I mean, listen. All I'm trying to say is that if you don't like stuffing, you're cringe and bad. Don't talk to me.
uh, thank you very much for hopping on. I appreciate you very much. Also, you should consider going into voice acting. I feel like you would make a very lucrative career voicing like a grim Western cowboy. Um,
I get that a lot. Yeah.
yeah. I feel I'm serious. You should put together like a voice reel and audition for some things. But anyway, I love you very much. Thank you for coming on.
Hell yeah, brother. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Bye.
Ciao.
Ah, yes. I don't know if Prince Harpseal streams, but if you guys want to follow, um certainly feel free. Very cool ass dude. I agree. Um thank you so much for chatting. I appreciated that in on a very existential level. All raids lead read all raids lead to Riverboat Jack. It seems it's true. My content is just so good. We're building up a leftist community here, and people got a raid. Uh, Xavier Zeta, thank you very much for the raid. On that note, um, I appreciate you so much. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Um, and yes, everybody, I'm a market socialist. I talk about issues relating to gender and socialism and LGBTQ issues and all kinds of stuff, all kinds of other stuff too. Um, and yeah, we have call-ins sometimes, and people come in and chat, and I love it. I love talking with all you people. Um, and Duke Hollis, thank you very much for subscribing. I appreciate that immensely. You're supporting the channel in a profound way, and gosh golly, thank you very much. And Gabby N64, thank you for hitting that follow button. Y'all are great. I want to. My goal for the week, and I know it's ambitious. I want to hit 1,000 followers. You know, I'm not sure if we'll make it. Well, I'm not sure if we'll make it, but gosh golly, I would really like to. You know, or at the very least 900. You know. Let's see. Kvass residue. I would like to transition, but I feel the need to fake my death scenario. Pressing societal demands have turned me into a demonic chaos creature instead. Kvass, my best advice to you is just fucking do it. Like, if you're already at the point of like, I would like to transition, you should just do it. Don't do what I did and like hem and haw for like several years before like one of your friends commits suicide, and that becomes like the impetus for you to go and transition. Just save yourself some time and transition. It's going to be one of the best decisions you ever make, you know? That's my advice as a non-medical professional who doesn't know your situation. You know, obviously do whatever's safest for you. Let's see. I think Thanksgiving is a very immoral holiday. It's weird how much Americans celebrate feasting. Eating a lot of food isn't a good thing when there are so many starving people out there. When I first moved here, it was shocking to see how large the serving sizes are here at restaurants. Well, Lavender Gunner, already we produce 40% more food than the world needs to survive. The issue of feeding people who don't have food is largely one of capitalism. There's no capitalist incentive to feed starving people who don't have money to feed themselves. So this is why I advocate for socialism. With socialism, you don't need a profit incentive to go and feed people who are starving. So yeah, if your concern is people starving, I would encourage you to look more into socialism as a way of remedying that situation. Prince Harpseal, I adore you even more now that I know your voice, okay? Very thankful to be in this country. Take down Hassan, indeed. This is Operation Become Bigger Than Hassan, people. We're engaging it today on Evacuation Day. Not Thanksgiving, on Evacuation Day. We're gonna take the war on Thanksgiving to new heights. You just have to get me to be larger than Hassan, okay? I think you guys can do it. Boss, I will remember you always, okay? You're gonna be one of my right hand people, okay?